There are many different ways to travel across the world on Minecraft, whether that would be by foot or flying your way around. If you wanted to travel across an ocean, you would use a boat. Boats were intended for lakes and oceans, but if you decide to take a boat and ride it on ice, the boat goes really fast. Now, this opens up a new set of possibilities. Now, one of these possibilities include racetracks. Now, the concept isn't new, but a lot of the racetracks that I've seen in Minecraft are completely flat, or they don't seem to be very articulate. Now, it isn't too difficult to make a boat go down, but it's really hard to push a boat upwards with a player riding it. I designed a conceptual track, which took me about 2 days to make from start to finish. This track not only has a huge layout, but it also has 5 different ways of making a boat go upwards in height, along with some methods to go downwards. I also scattered a couple different obstacles to make the track a bit more interesting. At the end of this video, I'm going to be racing a couple of laps on this conceptual track, and I will be giving more general information in regards to the concept of boat racing. This is all completely vanilla. No mods were used in the making of this track whatsoever. So let's get started. So we start off our race with our usual starting area. Now, if this were to be a multiplayer racing track, what we would do, we would have pistons below the track that would pretty much surround the boat with ice blocks so the boats cannot go anywhere. Once the race starts, you have the pistons pull the ice blocks down so that way the players can get ready to race. Now, since this is single player, I decided to not do that concept, and we are just starting off with a normal ice track. So here's the first method of going upwards while riding a boat. The first 3 methods of going up we're going to cover is going to be based on slime blocks and pistons. Now, this first method is only going to push the player up 1 block in height. So what happens here is that there is a series of pressure plates, and when one of these pressure plates is pushed, you push the platform upwards. The slime blocks take the ice blocks that are surrounding them and bring them along and pushing them upwards. As a result, you get a large area that is pushed up by 1 block, hopefully where you can get a boat at a general range of speeds. Now, you cannot push the pistons right away. So if you look down here, you can see that there are repeaters that have a 2-tick delay. This 2-tick delay is important because it gives just enough delay for the boat to get onto the platform before the pistons push all of the blocks up to get onto the next platform. If you start it any earlier, the pistons are going to push up the blocks before the player is able to get onto the platform, and you're going to block the player out. And that's not what you want to do. However, if you start it off too late, then we're going to have issues when the boat goes at higher speeds. Meaning that the boat is going to get across to this end before all the blocks are pushed up, and you're going to kill all the speed again. So you really have to trial and error to determine which delay is going to work the best. But in this case, we are doing a 2-tick delay, and I think that'll work enough. Out of all the methods that you can do to push a boat upwards, this is my least recommended way of doing it, because while it is, while there is the option to provide a little shortcut here, because there is a small off chance that a boat will get launched up from this 2x2 selection of slime blocks, which I have designed an intricate little shortcut for to cover that. Worst case scenario, what happens here is that the boat can get stuck in the platform and the boat will break and the player will be ejected from the boat and they can't ride anymore. And they won't be able to get back on it either because their boat just broke. I would not recommend using this method to get a boat to travel upwards. So let's just give this a quick test. So as you can see, I got pushed 1 block upward, and now I'm already there. Again, with least, I don't recommend this. It's very glitchy, and I just don't recommend you do this one. Now, we take a turn, and we come across 2 different launch pads here. So this is the second method that you can use to move a boat upwards. Now, what you do here is you have the same pressure plate layout, but this time you have a wide area of slime blocks for a whole lot of coverage, and you have a wall to stop the boat from going anywhere. So that way you get the boat directly below these slime blocks, and then when you launch the boat, it gets pushed upwards. And then you put a bit of water right there. You put a bit of water at the top of the elevator, and that's what's gonna push the boat afloat. And then you end it off with a end track. Now, what I decided to do here is I decided to add a wrong and correct option. So there is one option that is 4 blocks wide, and you can get pushed up there. And then there's one that's 3 blocks wide. Pretty much just the same thing. Now, one option is wrong, and which one is correct. So, when you get the correct option, you hear this sound. When you get the option wrong, you hear this sound. So pretty much what happens here is I made it so the player has to choose between either the left or the right, and whatever option they chose could either help them or bite them later. So the wrong option is a slide of water, which is going to slow down the player because boats don't travel as fast on water as they do on ice. Meanwhile, with the correct option, they just get a path of ice, meaning that whoever gets the correct option will hopefully catch up to whoever chooses the wrong option, maybe even get ahead of them. We merge into one path again. So this second method of getting a boat upwards is a lot more reliable than our first method, because we can guarantee that the boat is going to get into the wall, and we can be able to push them up that way. Only problem is, if the boat enters the pressure plate too slowly, or if they run into the center wall, they are not going to be able to make it onto a launching pad, and that's going to cause issues because they're going to raise the platform up, and they won't be able to get on it. So they will have to back up and then try again. So unlike the first method, I decided to set this to 4 ticks to hopefully give the player more time so that way they can get onto the launching platform and hopefully get them to stop moving for this to be more successful, because that is one disadvantage. If the player keeps on moving while they're on the launch pad, they're going to get that initial launch, but they will stop moving upwards all of a sudden, and that's not something that we want. So that's one of the biggest issues I think is wrong with this method, and let's just test this out ourselves. And there we go. We decided to go into the right option. The launch pad pushes us up into this puddle of water. We were able to get on top of the water, and we managed to make it up successfully. And we got it correct. So there are some signs right there saying whether you got it correct or wrong. And here we have what is dubbed a checkpoint. Now, it's unlike the other redstone contraptions that I have used. I decided to use tripwire hooks because they take a lot less time for them to release, so that way players are more likely to stumble across the checkpoint and hear this sound. So I think that is a really golden method. So The reason why I chose a tripwire hook over a pressure plate is because you are able to trigger this at a much faster rate than you do with a pressure plate. So here are some note blocks here. I put them under some gold, and pretty much you get a bell effect. This one is set at 1 tick, and this one is set at 2 ticks. Then we continue forward as we start to see a little bit of a way of traveling downwards, but there's one big problem with this. The drag physics of the boat in Minecraft are unrealistically high, so all this speed that you'll be gathering up is pretty much just gonna go away, even at a short 1-block jump. So just by doing that alone, we just killed half of our speed because of the amount of drag that the boat has just went through by being airborne. So that's one of the biggest issues with going downwards in boat racing, is that due to the high amount of drag that the boat has in Minecraft, you're going to be getting a lot of your speed killed. So that's very unfortunate, and it's going to cause some problems later on. It's also very unfortunate because it also limits a lot of concepts you could do. So, like, if you ever thought about boats gliding in the air, maybe do that for a concept. You really won't be able to do that because the drag is just going to completely stop your boat, and you'll only be able to travel 10 or 20 blocks at most. So the next obstacle that we have here, this is where our shortcut ends. So we have a little obstacle course here. So I decided to randomly scatter a bunch of wooden fence posts just to provide it as a little bit of inconvenience to the boat. So practically this is going to be our speed bump. So notice that I'm trying to get around them, but I just keep running into new ones because it's not that easy to control a boat, but it is controllable. But there you go, I just managed to make past it. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Alright, and so that's pretty much just a little obstacle that I made just to, you know, make the race more interesting. Here we have another checkpoint, makes the same sound. And here we have blue ice. So if you don't know, blue ice makes boats travel at an even faster speed than ice or packed ice. Blue ice will make the boat go about twice the speed as a boat would on ordinary ice. And this can be used in making turbo pads or all that sort to give a little speed boost to people who need to catch up to other players. Right here we have our third way of pushing a player upwards, and this is the final piston and slime concept. It's similar to the second concept, except you're not stopping the player from going anywhere. You're basically gonna try to keep their momentum as much as they can. So what you need to do is you need to create a 3x4 area of slime pads, and you need to surround them with obsidian. So that way the slime blocks cannot grab any of the surrounding blocks, because if we were to replace this with anything else, these launch pads would cease to work because there would be too many blocks for the pistons to push. So if you're going to make a launch pad, you need to make a 3x4 area, and you need to surround them with obsidian to make sure that they are functional. Now, like before, you need to do wooden pressure plates just to make sure that you can trigger their pushing, and set them at a 2-tick delay, just like the first one. Now, hopefully this should be able to work with most speeds. Now, make sure that your boat is not going at extreme speeds, because if that were to be the case, then I'm sure your boat is going to glide over the jump pads, and they're not going to be able to go upwards. Just like the second method, another issue with this jump pad is that there will be the occasion where if you try to jump, like, you'll get that initial push upward, but then it all of a sudden stops. Now, I don't know if this is supposed to be intended or if this is a glitch, but this is how it's supposed to work, and we get up here. Now, that is if it works perfectly, but if it were to not work perfectly, you'd only be able to make it like a couple blocks up, and then all of a sudden, you would just stop moving upwards, and that is a really big issue when it comes to slime and piston methods of moving a player upwards in a boat. Overall, with these three methods, you wouldn't really use them in a multiplayer track. You would mostly use these in a single player track. Now, if you want to, you could probably try to cleverly integrate this into a multiplayer track, maybe to give a bonus shortcut of some kind, but I wouldn't make your race too reliant on these jump pads because they are kind of glitchy and they can only support one player at a time. So let's say you have one player that is behind you. Now, this person is going to be able to make it to that jump pad in time, but the player that's going to be behind them is going to be blocked by the slime pads, and they won't be able to get the jump boost. They will actually have to move backwards and then try again in order to get a successful jump. So, if you want to integrate these slime and piston techniques, it's best that you would do this for a single player track. Don't really use them in a multiplayer track. Now we get pushed upwards, and I added another obstacle, so more wooden pressure plates, but this time we come across dispensers that fire arrows. Now, what this does is it's sort of a luck test. Now, if you are lucky enough, and this is possible, you can actually make your boat dodge all of these arrows completely. I have done it before. But what's usually the case is you usually will get hit by one arrow. And if you get hit by one arrow, your boat motion just stops completely. And if you get hit by two arrows, which is very unlucky, your boat gets destroyed completely and you will have to go back to the checkpoint and try again from there. This is another little obstacle that I added just to make the course a little bit more interesting, just to make sure it's not so boring. Now we get to our fourth and fifth techniques of pushing a boat upwards. Now, unlike the slime and piston techniques, these techniques will work for multiplayer races, because this is capable of handling multiple players at once. You won't have any issues with delay whatsoever, and I think they are a lot less glitchy overall. So these are the water and soul sand techniques. So ever since 1.13, soul sand has the ability to generate these upward bubble streams, and it will force players to go upward. Now, this doesn't just apply to players. This applies to all entities, including boats. So if you were to not have soul sand in the first place and you were to try to do this water slope, what would happen is that the boat would just run into the water and it would sink. And after a couple seconds, the player is ejected from the boat. You basically just stop the player. But we can prevent this with the use of soul sand. So what we do here is, let's say, so the player's riding the boat, they run aggressively into the water slope, and instead of sinking, the soul sand is going to push the boat up all the way to the surface, so that way it floats and the player can progress. This is a bit more tedious to build than slime and piston, because this only works if the soul sand has a water source block above them. So you cannot just simply put water buckets above here, let them drain down, and just expect it to work right off the bat. You will have to use the water bucket on every block possible in order for this method to work. But this method is a lot less glitchy, and it will easily work with multiplayer. So multiple players can get on this at once, and they will be able to get past this just fine. Now, this particular method of traveling upwards really helps with aggressive slopes. So as you can see, we are able to travel a couple blocks high, and we will be able to do this with ease. Now, the only issue is that if you try to get a boat to climb up this, it can kill speed entirely. So the player's boat can all of a sudden stop moving because you just went into water and you won't have that same speed anymore. It's the only other way that you can push a boat upward. So let's give this a try. And as you can see, the soul sand pushed the boat upwards, and we were still able to get onto the surface of the water, and the boat didn't sink, and we were able to make it past the slope. So this is the fourth method that I would try. Really use this if you have to deal with aggressive slopes of any kind. If you want to deal with any uphill action, I highly suggest you do this so that way players can travel upwards. Now we have a sharp turn, which is the only sharp turn that is in this race. I obviously put a little barrier into it because you will most likely run into the side of the track. So I made a little barrier to hopefully bounce the player back. Now up next we have another obstacle, which is like before, there are two options to select from. There is a left option and then there is a right option. Only one option is correct. And this takes us to our last method of going upwards. Again, this uses water and soul sand, but what you do, you use soul sand, you place soul sand at the bottom, you place a whole bunch of water upwards, and the soul sand is supposed to quickly push the boat upwards, and you will be able to get to the top of the elevator. Now, you do have to make the first block ice, because if you make the first block soul sand, the player is going to get stuck in the top of this obsidian, and that's not what we want to do. And also, we have to make the entire entrance full of signs, so that way water cannot leak out. What's great about this method is it's similar to the second method of pushing a player upwards, where it is an elevator, but the great thing is it is much more flexible. This can work with any height, while in the second method, you only can do one height, because slime blocks and pistons can only push you up a specific number of blocks. This method allows you to work with a much wider range of height. Now, of course, there is still a limit because there is a matter of time until a player is forcefully ejected from a boat because the boat is considered to have sunk. Now, of course, this track does have a wrong and right selection. In this case, I made it the left. The same sounds follow. This is what happens when you get it wrong. This is what happens when you get it right. And what I decided to do here is that the left side is going to have blue ice. The right side is going to only have packed ice. The left side gets an advantage here because, like I said earlier in the video, boats travel about twice as fast on blue ice. So whoever travels on the correct path will most likely be able to get ahead of players that are on the ordinary path. Then we come up to another checkpoint, making the same sound, and here we come across a major 180 turn. Now, this is doable, but it is really hard. That's why I decided to add these red and white wool borders. They aren't necessarily one block up like so, because if we were to do it like this, the player's gonna run into these and they're gonna bounce around a lot on the track, and that's not something that we want to do. When we place the border at the same level as the ice, we slow down the boat. So, blue ice, the boat goes really fast, but as soon as they head onto a border, their boat slows down immediately. This means that they are less likely to fall off the edge, and they will be able to get back on the ordinary track in no time. After this 180 turn, we decide to go to another checkpoint. To finish off this track, I decide to make a huge jump that goes into a river, and then we have a huge downward slope that goes to end off the track. So this is the second method that you can use to travel downwards, a water slope. Now, the great thing about a water slope is you don't have to worry about drag, because the boat is just going to be riding on the water, and the water is going to be its current for transportation. And I added a little supposed ramp right here. Now, this is the closest that you're ever going to get to ramps. Now, I wish ramps were an actual possibility in ice racing, but I've tried many different methods. There isn't a method that really works, and even if you do find a ramp method that does work, the drag physics of the boat are really gonna stop that air time from happening. So ramps are not really that much of a possibility. This is the closest that you will ever get to a ramp. Then we get to the finish line, and that ends off the lap. When you end off the lap, you hear this sound. And that pretty much just summarizes the race. So throughout this race, I've shown you 5 different methods of getting a player's in a boat to go upwards, and 2 different methods of traveling downwards, a water slope and just doing the casual building down. Now it's time to put this track to the test. Now, on average, it takes about 90 seconds to complete a single lap of this race. So I'm gonna place my boat down and we're gonna get started. Oh, dang it, we got a bad start. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So, of course, there are still plenty of things preventing this from becoming a functional race, and an overall game mode even. Starting off with a lot of redstone. A lot of the redstone for this race includes a checkpoint system, a lap system, and including some minor code, such as if your boat malfunctions, you go back to the previous checkpoint and you start again. Now, of course, that's because I have a hard time with scoreboards and the weird command block language. I'm not very familiar with command blocks, and I'm saying this as somebody who knows Lua, Python, and Java, the programming language that runs this game. I imagine with the proper amount of redstone programming and some creative map designing, we could possibly have a new game mode in Minecraft. Now, this is only vanilla Minecraft, so if we were to add Bucket or other server mods into the equation, there are probably more concepts that we could unlock in boat racing and how we could probably expand this. But what do you think of this new concept? Do you think it is a great idea to see in future servers, or do you think it is going to be a flop? Write a comment down below telling me what you think. Now, if you haven't already, please leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Ring the bell to get notified for every new upload that I put out on this channel. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Peace!